You're watching TVC Breakfast. The rains are here again, and with it comes flooding.
The Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency annual flood outlook predicts that about 600 local government areas are under threat of flooding this year. At least 74 local government areas in 30 states will experience severe flooding between June and September. 279 local government areas would experience minimum flooding across the country during the period. The flooding will be helped by inflow of water from the trans-boundary in River Niger and River Benue. Joining me now is an environmentalist, John Ekoko, the man whom we have called the flood man. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Now, year in, year out, we get reports about flooding in 30 states, and perhaps we could say the whole country is experiencing flooding. Yeah. What really is at the root of this issue?
Okay. Very quickly, flooding in Lagos is principally because Lagos is about 4% below sea level. Secondly, because of climate change, the intensity of the rainfall is heavier. So the drainage cannot cope. In fact, what we have in Lagos is more of what we call flash floods. Mm. Yes, there is an improvement in the management.
In Lagos?
Yes, but we have infrastructure deficiencies and we have technology problems. Let's take a look at the waste dumping. It has reduced, but it is still there, particularly in market and commercial areas. And these things, they go into the drains and they block the drain. And also, the walls of the drains, you know, they are doing more with concrete today, but not all of them. So what happens is that these drain there, these channel waterways, they cave in from time to time. That must be managed. Now, if you look at the rest of the country, you've read it in your preview now, that along the water banks, particularly of the Niger and the Benue, all the states along those banks, at this period of heavy rainfall, what happened? The water level rises.
But seeing the havoc it has caused over the years, how much effort do you see that we have done to ensure that we don't get as much
Fantastic. I like that
impact?
comment.
Yeah.
But one thing I will tell you is that when the cripple hears information, disaster cannot overtake him. In other words, because we know these things, it helps us to prepare to an extent. But there is the typical Nigerian problem.
Which is?
Lack of responsiveness. For the first time last year, the part of the government, the part of the people, even look at the houses that are collapsing because of the rains. Houses are marked down. People are told to leave. And for sentimental reasons, they remain there.
Where would they go to?
Yes, good question. Actually, when there are what we call emergency cases like that, the government should at least try to provide an alternative. Because those houses should actually be pulled down. Now, there are a risk, not only to the occupants, but to the surrounding buildings. Number two, look at our electric poles. Many are not standing firm. The one that happened in April, you saw a pole falling on a car. In fact, just yesterday, a 5-year-old boy was rescued somewhere in Lagos here. Because an electric pole came down, and the boy thought
it was just a cable.
Thank you. Thank God there were people there. And there was a man
electrocuted.
I mean, look at those cases. Those are preventable. But coming to the general thing, one, Hydrological Agency and NIMET, they are giving more regular warnings. States also should be encouraged to set up local weather forecasts, which should be specific to their areas. That will help. Number two, the government needs to take the lead here. Because I talked about infrastructure deficit.
Yes.
We have not put in place enough infrastructure to discourage what we call irregular dumping of waste. Up till today, you still see people either from their cars, they throw waste onto the road. Like I said, particularly in commercial places. Honestly, it is very sad. It's a sign of our underdevelopment. I mean, what's wrong in putting toilets, you know? I can see it's already.
All right.
This is not the first time we're getting warnings like this. Yet, we still get into the flooding and people still suffer all of the things that are warned against. What should we begin to do right now?
Yeah, thank you. The first thing is we have to reconcile to the fact that we cannot eliminate flooding, but we should be able to reduce it to the minimum. And I think that's where the problem is. We're not doing enough to reduce it.
As a people or as a government?
Both as a people and as a government.
Right.
And
what should we be doing?
Thank you very much. First, flooding is a natural occurrence, given our topography and the effect of climate change. Lagos particularly, that is slightly below the sea level, is prone to flooding. It doesn't flood as often as states along the banks of the Niger and the Benue, which we talked about. But the intensity of the rains are higher today because of the effect of climate change. That means that there are actions that Lagos should particularly take because of the consequence of this flooding. They are beginning to take them, but resource constraint is one that is limiting what they can do. Number two, infrastructural gaps. They are so heavy that you cannot do all overnight. But looking at
all these are still a little medium to long-term arrangements.
Thank you. Now, let's start with the immediate. The attitude of the people is still detestable. People build on water channels. Who does that?
But sometimes people don't know that this channel or this area is meant for
channel water.
So the point
they
there is...
know.
Okay.
The issue is this culture of impunity. I can do it, nothing happens.
But government is meant to regulate all that.
That is part of the problem. That is in the immediate. We have enough laws. Let us enforce them. People build on water channels. It is madness.
All right. Now, apart from Lagos, we're looking at
other areas.
Other areas, we're talking about settlements or communities that are on the bank of River Niger, River Benue, and all of that. What should they be doing? Because they don't have the same challenges Lagos has.
In those other, let me call them outlier communities, there is simply a problem of poverty playing out. One, the pressure on the land has increased around the river banks. There is no commensurate development, such that when the flood level starts to rise, the people don't have alternatives. So they are what? Helpless victims. That's one. Number two is that now some of the bad habits that we have in the cities are being exported to the villages. What do I mean? Usually when I was growing up, those villages were very clean places. You don't throw dirt anyhow. Go to the villages today. You see sachet water, plastics.
Everything is everywhere.
Everything is everywhere. And also, what we've observed is that even the government in itself, you can recall when you were young, there were health inspectors. Where are they today? They are nowhere to be found. Houses that should be inspected.
How is sanitation, environmental sanitation helping in all of these? Because that's what we still have today.
Thank you. Environmental sanitation has become a time to relax and
rest
at home and play ball. Honestly, the issue is that most of our problems are man-made. That is my personal conviction. Because even if you take away the technology and the infrastructure, there are things we can do to help ourselves.
All right, but back to this warning by the Hydrological Agency, those who are living in flood-prone areas, should they begin to relocate, or is there anything they can do if they discover my house is, or where I'm living is within a flood-prone area?
Thank you. There are two things there. There is what we call flood prediction.
Okay.
There are more accurate forecasts these days coming up. People just need to do what? Comply. That's one. Number two, there's what you call flood-resistant habitation. Okay. I've mentioned it before here. Go to Makuku. There's a pilot scheme running there. There are type of structures you build. Not all areas are equally exposed. But up till today, you still see thatch houses, mud houses, zinc houses, without any consideration for the consequence of one, more rampant flooding, more intense flooding, and more disastrous flooding.
Now, this every year we see this, or we hear this projections and predictions of how bad the flood is going to be. But how helpless are we as a people and citizens of Nigeria when it comes to this flood?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, the predictions are more accurate, they are more sophisticated, but the cause, which is effectively climate change, is also beyond our capacity. In other words, like I said earlier, the intensity of the rains is far greater than what used to happen. And number two, what I would call the flood level, the water level, is rising very fast. In other words, whole communities can be swept away very easily today than before. And the question now is, how helpless are we? In the face of this gargantuan challenge, what have we done as a people to even protect ourselves? The question is, we still live at 1950 level.
1950?
Yes. The saddest part of it is that right from town planning to individual households, we assume that nature will bow to us. We bow to nature. We live on nature. We still have densely populated places. The development so far has not addressed those places. And if you look at places like Lekki and Babish and their fantastic structures, they have not reckoned with the other side of the habitat. If you drench this place or you sandfill this place, the water will find another level. It will create another problem. That is still another disaster that we have to take care of.
So how do we handle such kind of situation? Because, because there is the pressure of development. People are calling on government to build houses. People are calling on government to build infrastructure. And infrastructure will keep building and springing up.
Thank you. That is where planning, effective town planning comes in. There are planning, let me just say there are planning regulations even before independence, which if you keep to it, my God, it will effectively take care of the usual obstructions. Like I said also, there are instances of flash flood here with proper drainage. When the more intense rains come, for a few hours, it will flood the place. But not long after, it will go. Lagos State is telling us today that they've put structures in place so that after every rain, the flash floods will disappear. But we all know that it is not really so. In the few highbrow areas, look at Ikoyi till today. There's still a lot of maintenance going on. But how much of it? Yes, if you pass through Ajegunle, there are tarred roads. But in between the tarred roads and on the edges, what do you see? Very, very densely populated settlements.
Now, for people who are not necessarily in the major cities, like in Lagos and maybe Port Harcourt and Abuja, what should they be doing now, especially for those within the River Niger basin, between the River Benue?
The tributaries of
the tributaries and so on, yeah.
Now, those communities, they must either adapt or perish.
How
fantastic. The habitations in those places are still far, far barbaric than what we should have around there at this. Go and pass by the banks of Lokoja. You'll be shocked. We still have primeval settlements. It shouldn't be. And like I said also, on top of it also, you still have, this encroachment, this greater density, which was not there before. And if you look at the river bank, usually there should be a gap between the river bank and settlements. The gap has been bridged. Right. People build right onto the water.
Onto the water.
So why would they not be victims? like we used to say, the wetlands are the lungs of the coast. There are no more wetlands. Nobody plants trees. Nobody, plants grasses that should absorb the water from the river.
Tree planting, would that also help
Oh,
in
fantastic.
mitigating flooding?
Very, very
Okay.
fantastic.
Right.
It keeps the soil firm.
Right.
It also absorbs the water from the ocean and prevents it from actually going onto the settled areas.
So most of the solutions to these are long-term, and we need to take the steps right now.
Tree planting is short term, plant grasses.
But for them to have effect or impact,
Yes.
it's long-term. That's what I mean.
Yes, it must
All right.
be planned.
Thank you. We have to leave you here now. Thank you very much, John Ekoko, for coming on the program.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for always enlightening us on this.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
All right.